You open your refrigerator and expect it to work.
It hums quietly in the corner of your kitchen.
Cold air circulates inside.
Milk stays fresh for a week.
Meat lasts a month if frozen. But 12,000 years ago, none of this existed.
No electricity.
No glass doors.
No thermostat.
So how did ancient humans keep their food from rotting? The answer is stranger than you think. Food spoils because of microscopic invaders. Bacteria, fungi, enzymes. They break down nutrients.
They release foul smells.
They turn meat green and milk sour.
In warm conditions, a piece of raw meat becomes dangerous in just 4 hours.
A single bacterium can multiply into 16 million in 8 hours.
The clock was always ticking.
Ancient humans were racing against decay every single day. And they won. The first weapon was smoke. Around 50,000 years ago, humans discovered that hanging meat over fire did something unexpected. The smoke coated the surface with compounds that bacteria could not survive. Phenols, formaldehyde, creosote. These chemicals seeped into the meat. They created an invisible shield. The meat turned dark.
The texture changed.
But it stayed edible for weeks instead of hours. Smoke was the first refrigerator. And it was powered by nothing but burning wood. But what about the cold itself? In 400 BCE, Persians built structures called yakhchals. These were enormous cone-shaped buildings made of thick mud brick.
They stood in the desert heat.
Outside temperatures reached 50 degrees Celsius. Inside, ice stayed frozen all summer. How? The walls were thick enough to block heat transfer. The cone shape pushed hot air upward and out through a small opening at the top. Underground channels brought cold water from nearby mountains. The Persians made ice in the desert.
Think about that for a moment. You live in a world where ice melts in your drink within minutes.
They made ice last for months in a place where the sun burned everything. But could you do something even simpler? Could you just bury your food?
Yes, and thousands of cultures did.
The Irish buried butter in peat bogs. The bog's acidic, oxygen-free environment stopped bacteria from growing. Butter buried in 3000 BCE was dug up in 2008. It was still recognizable. Some people even tasted it. It reportedly still tasted like butter, slightly tangy. But butter, 5,000 years underground and it did not rot. How is that possible? Bogs are natural preservation chambers.
The acidic water leaches out calcium and magnesium from the soil.
This prevents bacterial metabolism. The lack of oxygen below the surface stops decomposition entirely. Organic material sinks into this chemical soup and gets locked in place. Bog bodies from 2,000 years ago still have skin, hair, and fingerprints.
The bog does not care if you are a piece of butter or a human being.
It preserves everything it touches. Then there was salt. Salt was the ancient world's most powerful weapon against decay.
Roman soldiers were sometimes paid in salt. The word salary comes from salarium, meaning salt money.
Salt pulls moisture out of cells.
Bacteria need water to survive.
When you cover meat in salt, you drain it of the liquid bacteria require. The meat shrinks, it hardens. It turns into something that can sit on a shelf for months without spoiling.
The Egyptians salted fish and traded it across the Mediterranean.
The Chinese salted pork and stored it for winter. The Vikings salted cod and sailed across oceans with food that never went bad. Why would an empire pay its soldiers in something that just makes food taste better?
Because salt was not about taste. Salt was about survival. But salt and smoke only protected meat.
What about everything else? What about milk? What about fruit? What about grain?
The answer was fermentation.
And it was discovered by accident. Nobody planned fermentation. It happened when someone left milk sitting in a warm place and forgot about it.
The bacteria already inside the milk began consuming sugars.
They produced lactic acid. The acid lowered the pH. The milk thickened. It curdled.
It became something completely new. Yogurt. And yogurt lasted far longer than raw milk.
The same process turned cabbage into sauerkraut.
Soybeans into miso. Grapes into wine.
Grain into beer. Every culture on Earth discovered fermentation independently. The Chinese fermented rice 9,000 years ago. The Egyptians fermented barley 5,000 years ago. The Mongolians fermented mare's milk and called it kumis. They carried it in leather bags tied to their horses. The motion of riding stirred the milk continuously. The horse was the mixer. The saddle was the factory. But here's the part no one talks about. Fermentation does not just preserve food. It makes it more nutritious. Fermented cabbage has 12 times more vitamin C than raw cabbage. Fermented milk has more bioavailable protein than fresh milk.
The bacteria that cause fermentation are the same bacteria that live inside your gut right now.
You are not just eating preserved food. You are eating a living ecosystem.
The ancients did not know this. They just knew it worked. Then there was honey.
Honey is the only food that never spoils. Ever. Archaeologists found 3,000-year-old honey in Egyptian tombs. It was still crystallized.
Still sweet.
Still perfectly edible.
They tasted it.
Honey does not spoil because it has almost no water.
Its sugar concentration is so high that bacteria literally shrivel up and die inside it.
Bees also add an enzyme called glucose oxidase. This enzyme produces small amounts of hydrogen peroxide.
That is bleach.
Bees bleach their own food to keep it clean. The Egyptians used honey to embalm the dead. The Greeks used it to treat wounds.
Honey was medicine.
Honey was currency. Honey was a substance that defied time itself. And then there was drying.
The simplest method.
The oldest method. The sun did the work for free.
Africans dried fish on rocks under the sky.
South Americans dried potatoes on mountain terraces. The Inca invented a technique called chuño.
They left potatoes outside in freezing mountain nights.
Then they crushed them under the morning sun. The freeze-thaw cycle squeezed every drop of water out. What remained was a dry, hard white pellet that could be stored for 10 years.
10 years of food security from a single potato. Every technique you just heard about is still in use today.
We still smoke meat. We still salt fish.
We still ferment cabbage.
We still dry fruit.
We still bury cheese underground.
Your refrigerator did not replace these methods.
It only delayed them.
The moment your power goes out, you are back in the ancient world. Racing against bacteria, counting hours, watching your food change color and smell wrong. The real question is not how ancient humans preserved food without technology. The real question is whether you could do the same thing tomorrow if you had to.